Hi, this is Sara, and this is the Amphibian Press podcast. And today I'm interviewing Minerva Cerridwen, and she is the author of The Dragon of Enis, and as well as a couple short stories. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So your debut novel that hit stores May 16th. That's so exciting. Can you tell us? It never gets old, the whole hitting the publish button. Can you tell us a little bit about your world and your story?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say it's a novella and it will only be out as an ebook. So hitting stores is not physical stores, but just, the book market of the publisher and Amazon and stuff like that. The world, it's kind of a silly fantasy, so it's not really an epic quest or anything. The main character is Sir Violet, who's the knight of a very small, isolated village in Nice. And he's not very good at being a knight, per se. It's a light read, and I try to insert jokes, and it's not really high fantasy or anything like that.
Well, fantasy's been pretty dark lately, so it's nice to have the light stuff thrown in there.
Yeah. It really was a kind of story I felt at that moment I would like to read, and then was like, okay, I'll write it.
That's always good.
So I think it's suitable for all ages. It's also kind of interesting to know it doesn't have any explicit scenes. So that may be fun to know too.
Now it's a novella. Are you planning on expanding the world at all with sequels or longer fiction?
I might. I don't have any set plans yet. But I can definitely see myself returning there because, I really had fun with the characters, both Sir Violet and my dragon, who might go on more adventures. And also the missing baker and the wife, who have a fun dynamic, in my opinion. And there's also a child, Lily, who I think might be interesting to go visit when she's grown up. But there aren't any set plans yet.
The worlds always get bigger. I started with one book and now it's 12, and there's not enough time.
And there's so many other universes to explore. So,
what other authors have influenced your writing and the books you write?
I think my biggest influence for my entire life actually has definitely been Harry Potter series. Even they come with their own problems and stuff, but it's an awesome universe. And when I was 11, at the right age, I joined the Harry Potter forum, and that was where I first used the name Minerva. And I met most of my friends there, and it's also where I first discovered fan fiction and how good fan fiction could be, and that really made me tumble into meeting more people online and reading in English because I wanted to reach more fan fiction. And so that was a really big influence, and without that forum I wouldn't have met like my Danish co-writer with whom I'm writing a science fiction novel, and I wouldn't have met other writer friends who beta read for me now. And so that was definitely the biggest one, not just for the books but for everything that came with them. And another big influence, which is kind of cliche for fantasy writing, is of course Tolkien. I wrote the entirety of The Dragon of Enis with the extended soundtrack of both The Lord of the Rings and Hobbit playing. So for that Shire feel of the small village.
I love that soundtrack.
Me too. It really gives an epic feel to just like the action of typing.
Even the small words.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah. Yeah, and that's also where I wrote my first long fan fiction back in Dutch and handwritten. So it's nowhere to be found, but it really got me going for longer stories and how you set up the beginning, middle, end thing. Mm-hmm. And as for more recent writing influences, I really want to say that The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers is the kind of story that I finished and I was like, I wish I had written this, because it's so much my kind of thing, and queer representation in there, and just a fun read. Yeah, so
I'll have to check that one out. I've heard of it, but I haven't added it to my list yet, so.
Yeah, I really thought that one was fun. And as for writing style, I really look up to Terry Pratchett and Douglas Adams, who can make puns out of everything and play with words with words in a way that makes it magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Terry Pratchett was quite the magician, so to speak, when it comes to words. Yeah. Now,
and I also. Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
Yeah, I was going to say I definitely want to read more by queer writers. There are quite a lot of them on my to-read list, but I find lately that it's hard to find time for reading, because it usually sacrifices time for writing, and that's kind of a hard balance to find.
That's always the balance for me too. It's like and even when I read, sometimes if I'm reading something for work, it's like, well, I'm technically still working, so but it's hard. Now, you talked a little bit about writing in English and learning how to do that through fan fiction, which I think is awesome. I love how much fan fiction influences writers, usually at an early age. But is it was it just to reach a larger audience that you switched to writing in English as far as your original work goes?
It's a part of it, because let's face it, there are a lot more English speakers and readers than there are Dutch ones. But it's also because I just started consuming more works in English as a late teen and early 20s, because before that my English was actually pretty horrible. Yeah, it just, because I was usually reading and talking in English, it just became more natural to express myself in my writing in English. So I got more of a feel for it that way. And I think what's also a part of that is that Dutch needs a lot more words to express the same thing as English. If you have an original English work and you put the translation in Dutch next to it, it will always be a lot bigger. And I like that you can be a lot more compact and put more layers in the same length of sentence in English.
That's really interesting. I had no idea. I mean, I'm not fluent in any other language other than English, but I've taken multiple language courses like French and Spanish, and I've learned a little bit of Greek. And it's so impressive to me to have someone write in a language that isn't their first, because I've had such difficulty just, doing homework in another language. So that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think learning languages is always, in Belgium we have a very different perspective on it, I think, than in English-speaking countries, because Belgium is such a small country, but we have three national languages. We have Dutch in the north, French in the south, and then there's a little bit in the east that speaks German. So we get all those languages and English in school. So yeah, we kind of have to learn languages, and I happen to love to. Not everyone does, obviously, but yeah. So yeah, we have a different perspective on that, in my opinion.
Oh, I think it's a better perspective, frankly. I think it's a little insular when you only speak one language. But
Yeah, yeah. Learning languages always comes with learning a bit of the culture and the way people express things. Because yeah, you can learn a lot from expressions, and so in certain languages you have some really funny ones that wouldn't show up in like Dutch or English, and yeah.
I remember reading
So
an article about
interesting.
how learning a language changes the way we think because of the way the sentence structures and like where the
Yeah,
emphasis is put. And I thought that was really, it made sense, but it was really fascinating. I hadn't thought of it before.
yeah.
So, um,
Brains are weird.
that's true. Now, in addition to your novella that's coming out, you have 3 shorter pieces that are out, or that will be this year at least. You're very prolific this year.
Yeah.
And it's Matchsticks in Unburied Fables, Frankenspider, which is in Darkling's Beast and Bruise, right? And then Summoned, which is in Love and Bubbles. So tell me a little bit about these pieces. I know a little bit about the Love and Bubbles one, but
I wonder why. Yeah, so we'll start with Matchsticks, which came out in October 2016. It's a fairy tale, as are all the stories in Unburied Fables, and it puts a celebration of all kinds of love central. It's a retelling of The Little Match Girl by H.C. Andersen. I just had to think how to pronounce it in English, sorry. Danish and Dutch English, you were. It's all a blur. Yeah, it's published by Creative Aces. So the central point was the queer, making the stories queer, and yeah, well, I kind of saved a little magic girl. She doesn't die in my story. She's found by a witch who charms her matchsticks so that they point to a person's true love, but it doesn't have to be a person. Sorry, doorbell. It doesn't have to be a person. It can be something you love to do, or things like that. And Unburied Fables, the 50% of the profits goes to the Trevor Project for suicide prevention of queer youth. So
wonderful.
Check it out. They support a good cause.
Yeah.
Then Frankenspider is something else entirely. It's a pretty small poem, basically about vacuum cleaning, but I promise it's kind of scary. It's in Darkling's Beast and Bruise, and I think that book is an awesome concept. I would definitely check it out, even if it didn't have my work in it, because it combines the horror poems with drinks recipes, so both alcoholic and non-alcoholic cocktails, milkshakes, and smoothies, and yeah, you name it. And yeah, I really think that's a fun combination. I can't wait to see which recipes have been combined with both my Frankenspider and the haiku I have in there. So that's really something I look forward to, but unfortunately I can't tell you the release date yet because I don't know it yet. But as soon as the publisher lets me know, I will of course share it on my website and in social media.
And we'll have all your links down below, so they can find it.
Thank you. And then, of course, Love and Bubbles, you know all about because you're in there too, yay. But for the viewers who haven't heard of it, it's an anthology of queer, or mostly queer romance stories and some heists, I think. So my story stars an awkward merman. I had to practice that word because it would only come out when I spoke like a whale. Merman.
It's sort of fitting.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
So the merman is trying to talk to his pretty demon neighbor, but and he wants to ask them in for tea, but then the demon gets summoned, and so does the merman because he happened to be touching them, and that kind of spoils the mood, or not. Who knows?
I love that concept. I just when I first heard about it, when they were releasing all the little blurbs,
Yeah.
it just sounded like so much fun. So I'm excited to actually read it this summer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is planned for August.
August, yeah.
I'm really looking forward to yours too. It's kind of funny because in my story, the catfish is a pet, and you have a goddess, if I get it right. So
Hopefully not the same one.
That could be interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's really exciting. So now 2 of your pieces are part of queer anthologies, which is lovely. Now, what started you writing queer fiction? Was that something that started with the fan fiction, since there's usually a pretty heavy crossover there?
Yeah. It was the first source of queer fiction for me. I didn't really know any published books, and at that point, not a lot of TV shows and films had any queer representation. And then Sherlock came along on the BBC, and it was never made canon, but especially after the first season,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people had canons of asexual Sherlock. and reading about that, before that point, I'd sometimes used the label, but I wasn't quite sure. But reading those stories was something like, hey, that sounds familiar. That's me, and that got me, reading more about asexuality in real life, and actually adopting the label, because that was actually really, really right, and not just like more right than the other stuff, so to speak. And that got me realizing how important it is to recognize your identity in all kinds of media.
Mm-hmm.
And since there wasn't a lot going around outside of fan fiction, or at least not that I knew of, I was like, I love writing, so it's kind of obvious that I will insert more queer characters.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be more. And that got me writing queer characters.
It's always so important. I remember the first time I saw a character on a book cover that looked like me, and it's just such a surprise when you're not used to seeing someone who looks like you, or feels the way you feel, and it's always so powerful, and it's so great to be able to try and put a little bit back into the world with that.
And not just for recognizing yourself, but also for understanding other people, because for me it was like sometimes a character would do stuff driven by attraction, and I would be, who does that? And then suddenly you're like, wait, that's not a standard to think that can't be real. So and in that sense, it's important to get the entire diverse rainbow of characters there.
I've recently.
Sadly, some are.
Yeah, I recently.
Sadly, some are really underrepresented.
Oh yeah. I started writing a character who's deaf recently, and just having to think about like not describing a world based on sounds was such, it's something that I haven't had to think about, and then I had to, and it's really, I think it's healthy. It's sometimes it's uncomfortable to try that, but it's as long as we try and do it well.
Yeah, indeed. It's scary because you're like, I don't want to do it wrong, but it's always interesting to look at the world from a different angle.
Now, do you have a favorite character or a favorite scene that you've written?
In The Dragon of Nice, I think my favorite character is the dragon himself, Snap, because he's a dragon, and also because of the way he interacts with other people. He's actually really polite, but he also he's really to the point as well, and that's something I really appreciate in people. So I also appreciate it in dragons. And as for stories or scenes that I've written, yeah, in again in the dragon, it's definitely chapter 5.
I'm writing this down.
For reasons. And as for stories, my favorite is actually one that hasn't been published yet, or hasn't even been sent to publishers yet. It's a science fiction novel I'm working on and I'm currently editing with my co-writer. And that's also by far the longest I've written. It's over 120,000 words. And yeah. I really look forward to showing it to the world, because we've been working on it for almost 5 years now. It's really evolved and it's really become a big part of our lives. And yeah, so that's my favorite. But yeah, people will have to wait for it.
Does it have a title yet?
No. That's one big point we need to work on.
That's always the hardest.
Yeah, we've been using a working title from the beginning, which is like a ship name over the main characters, Qwerty and Nora. We call it Quora, but it's not going to be the most marketable name ever, I'm afraid. So we do need to come up with something.
Well, that's later. That's later.
Yeah, one day.
So how does your day-to-day life affect your writing, or is your writing persona sort of separate? You use a pen name, correct?
Yeah, I do use a pen name, also partly because my legal name is pretty unpronounceable for people who don't speak Dutch. But also because yeah, Minerva being name I've chosen for myself and used since I was 11 is just closer to who I am, and not like the official persona. But yeah, as for day-to-day inspiration, I think it kind of works in the reverse in some ways, because I'm pretty much an escapist, not because the real world is all that bad. Even yeah, sometimes when you hear the news, you're like, okay, I'll just hide in a book. But yeah, it's not always for that reason. It's also because you have so many universes you can explore and create, and I think it's interesting to sometimes be in places that aren't here. So in that way I sort of escape from the real world sometimes. But yeah, one funny thing where I draw inspiration from my life is that when I studied to be a pharmacist, I had the subject of herbology or botany. It's probably not called herbology when you're not at Hogwarts, but I don't care. It's the same in Dutch for both of the Hogwarts subjects and the real one. So there we go, herbology.
No, botany works. Botany.
Actually, yeah, I actually really hated studying it, because it's this list of names you have to stamp into your head, and all the properties of the plants and stuff, and it's really interesting to read about, but not when you have to reproduce it at an exam. So when I was done with those subjects, I was really like, okay, that was it, no more plants for me ever. And now I have two stories for publication that draw inspiration in some way from plants, and that's kind of a funny turn of events to me. Like, oh, there they are.
It's funny how
And
like
sadly,
the smallest things will inspire a whole story.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, in the Dragon of Nice, all the names are plant names, and I've been looking up what properties those plants should have according to, like, yeah, both the medical stuff and the legends, and, to pick them. But yeah, it's not really a central point, but it was just fun for me to do, and then to find names, because that can be as hard as finding titles sometimes.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
So did you?
And sadly, I don't. Sadly, I don't meet that many dragons in real life.
Just keep looking. Keep looking. I'm sure there's somewhere.
Oh wait, here's one.
Oh, that's awesome. Does that one look like your dragon, or?
Yeah, I have a whole series of dragons here next to me who are cheering me on.
That's awesome. Did the naming off of plants, did that happen, like, did that come to you before you started writing, or did it just come to you as you started naming them, the characters?
It actually came from the fact that I had written a version of this story kind of in 2011 in Dutch. And it was about a knight and a dragon, but it was a completely different plot, and they didn't really meet that many other people. Didn't really have a message, but like the characters were more or less there. Mm-hmm. And that knight was called Viooltjesblauw, which is violet blue in English.
Okay.
And I kind of wanted to recycle that, and name just came from the fact that it doesn't sound like something you would call a knight. It's supposed to be tough, and yeah. So it came from that name, and then I wanted something silly for the dragon, which became Snap, and the previous name for that one was Paws. Bootjes. And then yeah, it sort of came from there, because I was like, so Violet is called Violet, but we usually know that as a girl's name. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's just because everyone has these flower names or plant names. And yeah, Juniper and Holly and all the rest happened.
That's awesome. Names are always something I try to make them mean something, but sometimes they'll just come to me and it's like, well, that doesn't mean anything, but I guess it's their name.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you can be like, yeah, he looks like a Violet. Yeah, like, yeah.
Looks like a George, sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So your book is releasing May 16th, your novella, and it's going to be ebook. And where else can people find you when they go looking for your other work? You have your website and Twitter and.
Yeah, I have the website, Twitter, Facebook. Mm-hmm. I post some drawings on Instagram, but I put book promo stuff in between. Yeah, I'm on Goodreads. I also have a Tumblr where I put stories every 2 weeks that are inspired by a photograph my friend makes. We've been doing that since 2013. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it used to be once a week, but that just became a bit too busy with all the other projects going on. And then it was more fun to actually keep going, but yeah, tone it down a little bit.
That's an awesome project. It's sort of like Patreon almost, in a way, with the installments. So
yeah, it's just 10 sentences per photograph, and we were actually inspired by a project Erin Morgenstern of the Night Circus,
Mhm.
the title. Yeah. She did a similar project, and we thought it was really inspiring because at the time I was trying to find ways to get more into writing again, because I just graduated from university, and before there hadn't been a lot of time to really keep something up. So that was the summer when we started up Paramatalanta.
Mhm. That's really cool. It's sort of little writing prompts too to keep the brain fresh.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it can be interesting because you have this picture of like a landscape, and you're like, what happens there? And yeah, that's a fresh way of finding inspiration every 2 weeks now.
Have any of those developed into larger pieces at all, or?
Not really. Partly because I published them on on Tumblr right away, so they out there. And yeah, usually I try to really make it a finished story or a finished scene in those 10 sentences. So yeah, it's probably inspired certain scenes that I wrote afterwards, or certain concepts that I played with, but I don't think any of them has become a big story.
That's fantastic, though. I should probably start trying something like that.
Yeah, it's been fun, and also because there's two of us to bounce on each other, and every 10th edition we switch the roles, so then I get to take a picture and she gets to write a story, and it's fun to see our different styles and the evolution of both the big pictures and the stories through time.
I'll have to check that out. That sounds really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just about it for our time. But
Okay.
thank you so much for stopping and chatting with me for a bit, figuring out the time difference.
Thank you so much for inviting me to do this and to get me over the fear of a video interview, because it's actually been really fun. So thank you.
You did great. You're fine. I'm like super nervous before every single one anyways. So it's nice when everyone's nervous.
Yay.
We all know. So.
Yay.
But this has been the Amphibian Press podcast, and I've been interviewing Minerva Cerridwen, and her novel is going to be coming out May 16th, so be sure to check it out. Thank you.